Protests continue in Sudan despite a political transition deal. The broad framework has been described as Sudanese-owned and Sudanese-led, but only has questionable popular support. I'm Andrea Sankey, and today's newsmaker is Sudan. Sudan's military and some political parties have signed a deal that will see the army step back from politics. Hailed by some as an important first step in the right direction, the deal provides a 2-year civilian-led transition toward elections. Theoretically, it should end the standoff triggered by the 2021 military coup, which derailed the civilian-led power structure that had overthrown Omar al-Bashir after almost 30 years in power in 2019. After signing the deal at the presidential palace, military leader Abdullah al-Burhan said civilian control of politics must be respected.
We sought and will continue seeking to achieve a number of goals, most notably to turn the military into a constitutional institution under the Constitution, law, values, and elected institutions of democracy, and banning its politicization or bias to any party, group, or ideology.
The agreement we have signed today is an important first step to correct the political mistakes and the flaws of the state, and to build a state of social justice and wise rule and the sustainable peace and democracy. To reach this, we believe it's necessary to apologize first for the violence and the mistakes of the state against the society across various historical eras.
Well, talks leading to the framework were facilitated by the United Nations, the United States, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. And the outcome has been broadly welcomed by the international community. The coup led to the suspension of billions of dollars in international aid. Now, over a third of the population is facing severe food insecurity. International partners have said a credible civilian government needs to be appointed before assistance can be restored. And there's hope this deal will do that.
The framework agreement will emphasize faith, freedom of thought, justice, development, and reform. It will also draw up a new constitution with the participation of all Sudanese parties. It will include steps to counter terrorism and corruption, while promising to combat the economic crisis. The framework aims to secure political dialogue and peace in the country, with fair and transparent elections. And the Sudanese armed forces will not engage in any commercial activities other than the defense industry.
Now, on the ground in Sudan, the deal has already faced major resistance. It is the first of at least 2 planned accords and was signed by Sudan's 2 ruling generals, plus the leaders of the country's largest pro-democracy group, Forces of Freedom and Change. But in response to the signing, the pro-democracy grassroots organization, Resistance Committee, called for demonstrations, saying the deal leaves out important issues, including justice for protesters killed and security sector reforms, which should have been included from the start. Ongoing protests have plagued the country since the coup last year.
The human rights situation remains concerning. Protests against military rule have continued and have largely remained peaceful. More often than not, security forces have acted, however, or reacted with excessive use of force. In the latest incident, on 24 November, 2 protesters were killed in Omdurman. This brought the total death toll among protesters, mainly in the capital, to 121 since the coup. Also, more than 8,000 have been injured.
Well, protesters are demanding the men who led last year's coup be brought to trial. And they fear the deal provides a lifeline to the army and the powerful paramilitary group, the Rapid Support Forces, both of which spearheaded the coup. Overall, they say the deal restores a partnership between political and security elites, betraying the fundamental ideals of the 2019 revolution.
We totally reject the deal because it doesn't meet or fulfill even 1% of the Sudanese street demands. At the top of it is holding the Matri's murderers accountable and achieving tangible result in the justice area, as well as other areas related to achieving freedom and peace. Those are our fundamental demands.
This settlement is completely unacceptable. We reject it because the goals required on the street have not been achieved through this settlement.
First, we say rest in peace to the martyrs of the revolution, and we say no negotiations, no partnership, and no compromise. This agreement is partnering with coup leaders. The people on the street are against the negotiation. We, the protesters, have a well-known slogan: no negotiations, no partnership, and no compromise, and the revolution shall continue.
Well, joining me now to discuss the new framework and what it might deliver are from Khartoum, Amjed Farid Al-Tayeb. He is a Sudanese affairs analyst and the former chief of staff to former Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdok. From Washington, we have Cameron Hudson. He's a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council's Africa Center. And from London, Hafiz Mohammed. He is the director at Justice Africa Sudan. Thanks all so much for being with us. Amjed, I'll start with you. Can you give us, and those protesters we just heard from, any reasons to be optimistic about this deal?
There is no reason to be optimistic about this deal. Actually, this deal have came as a political trade-in and a political deal that's a bad deal that wouldn't have produced anything better. And naming this agreement a framework agreement is wrong as itself. Because it's not a framework agreement, it's a final agreement, or it's agreements that have many final results and have no frame for any political process on it. It gives the coup leaders everything that they wanted from the coup: the independence of the army, the independence of the RSF, the immunity or the promise of immunity to avoid justice and accountability. And in the same time, it did not lay any realistic grounds of a political process that can lead to a sustainable solution. Okay. So I see no reasons to be optimistic about the outcome of this. What I'm seeing is that you will have an elite deal that retains some of the elite powers or elite political forces to power, without actual possibility of implementing the promises of the revolution in peace and justice.
Hafiz Mohammed, I know you think that this deal is at least better than nothing, but protesters and those like Amjad say it only really creates this partnership between the military and political elite that effectively takes Sudan backwards.
Yeah, this is not an optimum deal, definitely. And I have been opposing the coup all the time. But the problem is, what do we have? Actually, if you compare any progress towards at least putting us in a track to try and find something, it's better than this. The current status quo is not sustainable because the country is actually collapsing. I know I just came from Sudan for a week ago. There's no government, the economy, the security, and there's nothing. I don't think you can sustain this situation. I think we're going to a total chaos and a total destruction. That is why the other reason is, we have not actually defeated this the NCP regime and not defeated this military junta. They are still there, and the other things, all the other antagonists and the parties are weak. No one have the power to actually give the final punch so they can take over the control, and that is a problem. But I think you can protest, but without having a united opposition and a clear program which can agree on it, they will not lead anything. That is a problem.
Okay, a united opposition is a problem. But Cameron, I mean, do you think this deal is better than nothing, or does it take from bad to worse?
Well, I think by not improving on the situation, it makes the situation worse. We've lived through many political framework agreements and peace agreements in Sudan over the course of the last 20 years. And the only thing that has changed really, or rather the only thing that hasn't changed, is that the military always survives all of them. And so I think we have to assume that going into these negotiations, the military was maneuvering to make sure that it emerged from these talks in a stronger position than they were in before, and they have done just that. I think there was a lot of pressure on the part of the international community and a lot of embarrassment on the part of the international community. Sudan was being held up around the world as a success case where we could transition from autocracy to civilian rule and democracy. And the administration, the international community has spent the last 14 months trying to return to some measure of civilian rule. And this was the best that they could do. I think that speaks volumes about the quality of this agreement, this political framework. And I think sadly, what we saw is when it was announced, you saw virtually every large government in the world come out within minutes and endorse this deal, giving really no opportunity for people to demonstrate their discontent. And so now we find the international community basically, wedded to the stakes and the interests of the military, political elites, and divorcing themselves from the millions of people who continue to take to the streets and risk their lives every day. And I just think that's the wrong side of history to be on.
I want to talk more about the international community's role in this, but first I want to bring up Hafiz's point about a lack of a united opposition here. Did that play a factor in what many see as the failure of this new agreement, even though it's been accepted, and that it will not work?
The opposition to the coup is united in its basic grounds, that they are anti-coup. They are all calling for democratic transition. And that's what's needed. You cannot ask civilian political activists to be united over everything. They are different, and their difference is by political means, which is talking, convincing people, taking peaceful measures. The problem is not uniting the civilians over everything. The military has no right to take arms to steal, actually, the power. This should not have been the case. And I beg to differ with Dr. Hafiz about this solution is moving us forward, because actually the bad solution is worse than no solution, because it prevents the good solutions of taking place. And as Cameron correctly pointed, this deal came out of the exhaustion of the institutional political actors, whether the Sudanese one or the international community, who was pushing for a settlement, any settlement. It is the same way that they were pushing during Bashir time for a settlement with al-Bashir. People have the right, and they actually have the duty to demand for their right in democracy and participation in the political direction of their country. Those 120 victims who lost their life in the street since the coup until now were actually responded to the second day after signing the coup by choosing the deputy of the coup of the leader, Hemeti, as the human rights person for the year in Sudan. After killing 121 peaceful protesters, he signed a framework agreement with the political elites, and suddenly he became the human rights champion of Sudan. This tells you the direction this deal is taking us forward. Okay. Let alone that the deal itself has a lot of shortcomings. There is a lot of flaws that will impact Sudan on the long term very badly.
Hafiz, are you still convinced that this is still better than nothing and it still somehow moves the country forward?
Yeah. Just one question for Dr. Amjed. The Constitution Declaration, which he used to be part of, and part of the Prime Minister Hamdok government, is not an optimum, but it is not a bad deal. But the problem is the civilian side of the government was so weak, so the military prevented from being implemented. And that is the problem. The problem of Sudan is not agreements, it's honoring agreements. That's our problem. That has been going on since 1972, 2005, comprehensive peace agreement. The problem is we have a very big civilian institutions which are not able actually to enforce and to implement the constitutions and the deals and to try and force them on the junta. That is the problem. But the other thing, I'm still saying, this is not an optimum agreement, and yes, I have a lot of doubt that it might not lead us to a safe way out. But if the current status is actually taking us to more disastrous situation in Sudan, I'm telling you, I've been outside, not only Khartoum, outside the country. There is no government, there is no institution, there is nothing. If you have a gun, you survive. If you don't have, you don't survive. This is what cannot be continued. We have to find a way out of that.
Cameron, sorry, no, I was just going to ask Cameron. It's hard to reconcile hearing such opposite interpretations of what the actual situation is. Where is the in-between here?
Well, again, I think the problem we face in Sudan right now is there really is no in-between right now. The people are in the streets because they are demanding a set of fundamental changes to the state and to the military's relationship with the state. And there is no way to gloss over those demands. There is no kind of compromise. We have an expression here in the United States that you can't be a little bit pregnant. And so that's the challenge here, is we have to find some way forward that is going to allow the people to achieve the things that they want to achieve and have set out to achieve, and figure out a way for the military to accept those changes. My personal perspective, sitting outside of Sudan as I do, is that the international community has a role to play, and that pressure has a role to play. And what we have seen is a total absence of pressure from the international community on the military to make these changes in earnest, with sincerity. So we have the words on the page, and of course the words on the page, if we had any faith that they would be implemented, then this might become a workable agreement. But again, if you assume that the military has gone into these talks with the premise that it is going to maintain power and emerge stronger from this, then the only way to change the situation, at least from the international community perspective, is to put the pressure on the regime. The people are putting the pressure on the regime by taking to the streets every day and registering their discontent. But as long as we don't meet them, then I think we're going to be on the wrong side of history, as I keep saying.
As you said, yeah, but I mean, this is where the confusion comes in. You say the international community, there's this lack of pressure on the generals in Sudan, but there were the United Nations, the United States, Saudi and the UAE, for whatever the value they contributed were all involved in these negotiations. I'm trying to understand, is what you're saying that they may really not want the military there, but they don't see any other options, so they're trying to kind of make the military feel normalized in its role in leadership in Sudan? And if so, why are the sanctions still there? Why is there is still a level of pressure on the military regime, because the sanctions are still active?
Well, no, the sanctions were removed from, all of the sanctions have been removed on Sudan, and there have been no new sanctions placed on the military since the coup d'etat in October of last year. Now, we have suspended development assistance, but as we saw,
that's what I'm talking about, though, and that's very important to Sudan.
Yeah, I think the issue is not the sanction.
It's important to
Wait,
the
hold on.
Sudan,
Let me let Cameron finish quickly, and I'll come back to you. Go ahead. Cameron, go ahead.
It's not important to the military. The military is not bothered by the suffering of average Sudanese. And so to withdraw development assistance, which is targeting the average Sudanese civilian, that costs the military nothing. That is not a penalty on the military. The hope is that it will increase pressure on the military by putting more people into the streets and demanding that change. But clearly they have not been sufficiently pressured to make those fundamental changes by simply street protest movements or the withdrawal of financial assistance.
Okay, Amjad, would you agree there that the international community, it sounds from what Cameron is saying, that they truly are doing more harm than good at this point?
The international community have developed a Stockholm syndrome-like syndrome in Sudan. They are normalizing with the military as a normal de facto government, and they are dealing with it, ignoring the fact that they committed a criminal offense of having a coup on the 25th of October 2021. This is not a political crisis of differences of opinion. This is a political. This is a coup d'état that happened against a constitutional agreed upon framework. This is one. The second thing, Emirates, Saudi Arabia, UK, and US, they all come with their own interests. Unfortunately, some of these interests does not go well with the interests of the Sudanese people and does not agree with them on having a real democratic transition in Sudan. The international developmental and humanitarian aid that's presented is important for the democratic transition. But since the coup, the US have avoided putting any sanction on the leader of the regime. Actually, they gave the head of the regime, the head of the coup, Burhan, a visa to visit and participate in the UN summit just a few months ago. And as well, they continue meeting him as a legitimate head of state. This is wrong. And while they recognize by the lip service and the statements that there is a political crisis in Sudan that's caused by the coup, they continue meeting him and trying to mediate between him and between the pro-democracy movement in equal footing.
Okay.
The problem in the side of the pro-democracy movement that the elites who are negotiating on their behalf of the people do not necessarily represent the demands of the people who are actually dying in the streets.
Okay. Hafiz, I mean, as you continue to believe that this deal is the best option out there, what about the reality on the ground as we speak right now? Protesters are actually still being tried in court, some even for the alleged murder of a police general. Others are getting hit with tear gas and are being attacked for just being on the street and protesting. How do you reconcile that?
Yeah, if the terms of this agreement is being translated into a constitution, then we will have a civilian institutions which can introduce laws and also make all the judiciary, the justice system more accountable and also hold the perpetrator to account if it is being implemented. But that is not a problem. There is a point here which I want to concentrate on. I think we're looking outside for the international community to support us. More than looking, the problem is inside Sudan. The problem is the Sudanese elite, the politics. They are the problem. Tell you one thing, look at the sanctions. The dictators will be able to actually, avoid the sanctions. They have China, they have Russia, which you have, and that happened in the 30 years of the NCP regime. They are prosperous, and the Sudanese people are suffering. I don't think that is going to happen. The other thing is we have to look inside. In October 1964, we don't have any support from the international community, which we managed to topple a dictator. In April 1985, without any support, at the time the Nimeri regime have support from the United States and others, the Sudanese people managed to topple it by united opposition, by actually mobilize the people, and unitedly stay all through in the interim period. That is not the case now. And even when I'm just talking about someone who been giving a reward to a human rights award to Hemiti, because of the patronage system, which the politicians themselves are part of it, is selling and buying. That is what weakens the situation.
Okay.
Yes, I know that people are against the regime, are protesting. They are correct. I totally agree with them. They're putting more pressure on them. But I think how can we move forward? That is the question which we need to answer.
Okay. I mean, Cameron, we'll finish with this. You know, this agreement lays out this 2-year transition period with a civilian prime minister to be appointed. So what do you actually see happening in these next 2 years? Will it just derail entirely?
Well, no, I think what I see happening is what has happened time and again in Sudan, where the military agrees to a deal, they erode that deal over time, but they continue to prolong their hold on power and their grip on institutions, and they they force the other side to fight tooth and nail to try to implement anything. And then when they think that their interests are finally threatened, then there'll just be another coup d'état. This is we are reliving the days of 2019 and the broad to power. This is kind of Groundhog Day all over again. And the fact that we're not recognizing it is
okay.
Is
yeah, Cameron, we're
shame
having
on us. It's not shame.
Understood. Cameron, we're having a lot of trouble with your audio, unfortunately, but that actually that's all the time we have. For this edition of The Newsmakers, I'd like to thank all three of my panelists really so much for being with us. I'm sure we'll be talking about this again in the near future. Thanks, of course, to our viewers as well. Remember, you can follow us on Twitter and do be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Andrea Sankey. We'll see you next time.